The blood spreading across the snow wasn't red, it was black, and the Alpha King's son had less than an hour to live. Elara's fingers froze on the moon's bane root she'd been digging. That scream, high, terrified, and too young, cut through the winter silence like a knife. She should have ignored it. Should have grabbed her basket and disappeared deeper into the forbidden forest where even the pack's hunters wouldn't follow. Instead, she ran toward it. Her boots crunched through the snow, her breath misting in the cold air. 3 years of living as a rogue had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now every instinct screamed danger. But that scream had been a child's, and Elara had never been good at walking away from those who needed help. She found him in a clearing, crumpled beside a frozen stream. A boy, maybe 7 years old, his small body convulsing. His lips had already turned blue, and his eyes, those pale gold eyes that marked him as royalty, rolled back in his head. No, no, no. Elara dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already moving to check his pulse. Weak. Erratic. His skin burned with fever despite the snow beneath him. Then she smelled it. Bitter almonds and rotting meat. Her stomach turned. Shadowthorn. Of all the damn, she grabbed the boy's face, tilting it toward the weak afternoon light. There. On his neck, just below his jaw. The puncture wound was small, barely visible, but the black veins spreading from it told her everything she needed to know. Someone had poisoned him. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Shadowthorn didn't grow in these woods by accident. It didn't just happen to scratch someone. This was murder, and this boy. Her breath caught as recognition slammed into her. She knew that face. She'd seen it once, 3 years ago, when she'd stood before the Alpha King and demanded he acknowledge their bond. The boy had been there, small and silent at his father's side. Prince Caden. The Alpha King's only heir. Shit. Elara looked around the clearing, her heart hammering. This was a trap. It had to be. But the boy convulsed again, a thin line of black foam appearing at the corner of his mouth, and she couldn't think about traps or politics or revenge. She could only think about saving him. Her hands moved on instinct, years of training taking over. She ripped open her satchel, scattering herbs across the snow. Moon's bane, yes. Silverleaf, there. She crushed them together, her fingers working fast despite the cold that made them clumsy. Stay with me, she murmured to the boy. Stay with me, little prince. She packed the poultice against the wound and pressed down hard. The boy didn't even flinch. Too far gone. The poison had already reached his bloodstream, spreading toward his heart with every weak beat. There was only one way to save him now. One way she'd sworn she'd never use again. I'm sorry, she whispered. To whom, she wasn't sure. Maybe to herself. Elara closed her eyes and reached for the connection that all Omegas had to the moon, that thread of lunar magic that most wolves had forgotten existed. It answered her call like an old friend, cool and steady despite the poison trying to cloud her senses. She could feel the shadowthorn now, a writhing darkness inside the boy's small body. Could feel it eating away at his life force, hungry and relentless. Most healers would try to neutralize it with herbs and time. But there was no time, and Shadowthorn didn't respond to conventional treatment. There was only one thing it responded to. A willing vessel. Elara placed both hands on the boy's chest and pulled. The poison came reluctantly, fighting her every inch of the way. It burned as it left his body, black smoke that only she could see, twisting through the air between them. She drew it into herself, gasping as the first tendrils touched her skin. It felt like ice and fire and broken glass all at once. Come on, she gritted out, pulling harder. Come on, you bastard. More smoke, more poison. The boy's convulsions slowed as the black veins began to recede. His breathing eased. But Elara's own chest tightened, her lungs burning as if she'd inhaled smoke from a funeral pyre. Almost done. Just a little more. The last of the poison left the boy in a rush, and Alara's vision went white with pain. She fell backward into the snow, her body seizing. The shadowthorn raced through her bloodstream like liquid fire, and she could feel it reaching for her heart, her lungs, her brain. Worth it, she thought distantly. The boy would live. That had to be worth something. Footsteps. Running. Voices. Caden. Strong hands grabbed her before she hit the ground. Alara's eyes fluttered open, and she found herself staring into a face she'd tried so hard to forget. Theron Blackmane. Alpha King. The man who had rejected their bond 3 years ago and banished her from the pack without a second thought. He looked different. Harder. New scars marked his face, and there was a weariness in those ice-blue eyes that hadn't been there before. But his grip was still strong, still steady, and for just a moment, one brief, treacherous moment, Alara felt safe. "You," he breathed. Not a question. A statement heavy with too many emotions to name. "Me," she managed, tasting blood. "You're welcome." Then the poison hit her heart, and everything went dark. When Alara woke, she was moving. Being carried. Her body felt like one massive bruise, and every breath sent shards of pain through her chest. But she was alive, which was more than she'd expected. "Put her down." That voice. Command and control wrapped in ice. She knew that voice. "Your Majesty, we should kill her now. She's a rogue, an outcast." "I said put her down." Carefully. The arms holding her, not Theron's, she realized with something that definitely wasn't disappointment, lowered her onto something soft. A bedroll maybe, or a cloak. She couldn't tell. Her eyes wouldn't focus properly, everything swimming in and out of darkness. "Caden?" "I'm here, Father." Relief crashed through her. The boy's voice was weak but steady. Alive. She'd done it. "This woman saved you." Theron's voice came from somewhere above her. She drew the shadowthorn poison into her own body. "Do you understand what that means?" "She's dying." The boy's voice cracked. "Like I was dying?" "Yes. And unlike you, there's no one here who can save her." Silence. Alara wanted to laugh, but her lungs wouldn't cooperate. Of course. Of course this was how it ended. She'd saved the Alpha King's son, and now she'd die in front of him anyway. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. "We have to help her." Caden's small hand found hers, warm despite the cold. "Please, Father. She saved me. We have to save her." "How?" Frustration bled through Theron's careful control. "Only an Omega can sense Shadowthorn. Only an Omega can neutralize it. And she's the only Omega healer in these territories who would have the skill. Then we take her to the palace." Caden's grip tightened on her hand. "You have healers there. Physicians. Someone must know something." "The palace?" Another voice, gruff and hostile. "One of the guards." "Your Majesty, she's..." "I know what she is." Theron's words cut like a blade. "I know exactly what she is." The world tilted as someone lifted her again. Theron this time, she'd know his touch anywhere, bond or no bond. Her wolf whimpered inside her, reaching for him even as the poison tried to drag her under. "You're not dying today," he said quietly, his mouth close to her ear. "I won't allow it. We have a debt to settle, you and I." Alara wanted to tell him where he could shove his debt. Wanted to remind him that he'd rejected her, banished her, destroyed everything she'd built in the pack. But the poison had stolen her voice along with her strength. All she could do was close her eyes and hope that dying in the Alpha King's arms wouldn't hurt as much as being rejected by him had. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Theron's voice, raw with something that sounded almost like fear. "Hold on, Alara. Please. Just hold on." Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Pain woke her. Not the poison, though that still burned through her veins like acid, but a sharper, more immediate agony that wrapped around both wrists and made her skin feel like it was being flayed. Silver. Ilara's eyes snapped open, and she bit back a scream. The manacles circling her wrists gleamed in the lamplight, already blistering the skin beneath them. Silver didn't just burn Omegas. It suppressed their connection to lunar magic, cutting them off from the only power that kept them alive. She was chained to a bed in what looked like a medical wing. Clean white walls, the smell of antiseptic and herbs, windows showing a night sky. How long had she been unconscious? Hours? Days? You're awake. Ilara's head whipped toward the voice, and she immediately regretted it. Her vision swam, black spots dancing across her sight. But even through the haze of pain and poison, she'd know that voice anywhere. Theron Blackmane stood in the doorway, backlit by torches from the corridor. He'd changed from his hunting leathers into formal attire, dark pants and a pressed shirt, his Alpha King medallion gleaming at his throat. He looked every inch the ruler. Cold. Controlled. Untouchable. Nothing like the desperate man who'd carried her from the forest. Silver chains, Ilara said, her voice hoarse. How thoughtful. Most people just send flowers. Theron stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. You're a rogue Omega with no pack ties. Standard protocol for 4 prisoners. She lifted her wrists, showing him the blistering skin. I saved your son's life, and you've imprisoned me. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised. You always did have a talent for cruelty. Something flickered across his face. Guilt? Regret? It was gone before she could name it. The chains are for everyone's safety, including yours. There are those in this palace who would see you dead. Then let them try. Ilara leaned back against the pillows, exhausted from even that small movement. I'm dying anyway. The Shadowthorn will finish what they started within 3 days. Maybe less. My physicians are working on a cure. Your physicians are fools. She cut him off with a harsh laugh that turned into a cough. Blood flecked her lips. Shadowthorn can't be cured with conventional medicine. You need lunar magic to complete the healing cycle, and lunar magic requires the sacred pools. Theron crossed his arms. I know. Then you know I need access to them. No. The word hung between them, flat and final. Ilara stared at him, searching for any hint of the man who'd begged her to hold on in the forest. She found nothing but ice. Your son is alive because of me, she said quietly. I drew a lethal poison into my own body to save him. And you're going to let me die rather than grant me a few hours in the pools? The sacred pools are forbidden to rejected wolves. Theron's jaw tightened. Omega magic on consecrated ground would corrupt. Corrupt what? Your precious traditions? Ilara pulled against the chains, ignoring the way they seared her skin. Or is it that you can't stand the thought of acknowledging me? Of admitting that you were wrong 3 years ago when you rejected our bond? I had my reasons. You had your pride. She spat the words at him. You looked at me, at our bond, and decided I wasn't good enough. That an Omega couldn't possibly be a fitting mate for the great Alpha King. Theron moved so fast she didn't see him coming. One moment he was across the room, the next he was beside her bed, his hands gripping the rails hard enough to make them creak. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You don't know what I... Then tell me. Ilara met his eyes, refusing to flinch. Tell me why you rejected our bond. Tell me why you looked at me with such hatred that day. Tell me why you banished me without a word of explanation. For a moment, she thought he might actually answer. His eyes, those ice-blue eyes that haunted her dreams, held something raw and wounded. But then his expression shuddered, and he stepped back. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Ilara's voice broke despite her efforts to keep it steady. It's mattered for 3 years. Every day I've wondered what I did wrong. What I could have done differently. And now I'm dying, and I still don't know why you destroyed me. Theron turned away, his shoulders tense. The physicians will find another treatment. Something that doesn't require the pools. There is no other treatment. Ilara closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her. But you're right about one thing. The pools are sacred. Too sacred to be used to save an Omega's life. I understand. Ilara. However. She opened her eyes and fixed him with a look that had made stronger wolves back down. Before I die, there's something you should know. Something about your son's poisoning. That got his attention. Theron turned back to her, his alpha instincts sharpening. What about it? It wasn't random. Ilara kept her voice calm, clinical. Shadowthorn doesn't grow wild in these territories. It has to be cultivated carefully, in specific conditions. And the poison in Caden's wound was fresh. No more than a few hours old. Someone brought it into the forest specifically to. No. She shook her head. The poison came from here. From your palace. I could smell it in the toxin, the same soil composition as your royal gardens. Someone who has access to your grounds, your greenhouses, your private spaces tried to murder your son. Theron went very still. You're certain? Omega senses don't lie, especially when it comes to poison. The Shadowthorn was grown here, harvested here, and used here. Your traitor isn't some outside enemy. They're close. Very close to your throne. She watched him process that information, saw the moment when Alpha strategy took over from fatherly fear. He was already running through suspects, analyzing threats, planning his response. Tell me who, he demanded. You sensed the poison. You drew it into your body. You must have some trace of whoever handled it. I do. Ilara smiled, though it hurt. And I'll tell you everything I know. But first, you're going to grant me 3 things. His eyes narrowed. You're bargaining? Now? I'm dying. I have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So yes, Alpha King, I'm bargaining. She held up one blistered wrist. First, access to the lunar pools. If I'm going to help you catch a traitor, I need to survive long enough to do it. 3 hours in the pools will complete my healing cycle. The pools are forbidden. Second, she continued as if he hadn't spoken, my healer's rights restored. I was banished from the pack, stripped of my position and my purpose. If I save your son and help you catch a murderer, I want my place back. I want recognition as a healer again. Theron's expression darkened. The Pack Council will never. And third. Ilara's voice turned cold. A formal investigation into our mate bond. Into why you rejected it. I want the truth, Theron. All of it. No more secrets, no more evasions. I want to know why you looked at me with such hatred. Why you threw away something sacred. And I want it on record, witnessed by the Pack Council. Silence filled the room. Theron stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Ilara met his gaze without wavering. You want to know who tried to kill your son? You want to stop them before they try again? Then grant me my terms. Otherwise, I'll take what I know to my grave in 3 days, and you can explain to Caden why you let his savior die. That's extortion. That's justice. She pulled against the silver chains again, letting him see her pain. You destroyed my life, Theron. You took everything from me. My pack, my home, my purpose, my mate. And now you want me to help you? To save your family while I'm chained to a bed in silver? No. Not without payment. I could order you to tell me. You could try. Elara smiled grimly. But Omega magic doesn't work that way. The knowledge I gained from the poison is tied to my own life force. You can torture me, threaten me, order me all you want. But the moment I die, that information dies with me. She was bluffing. Mostly. The traces she'd sensed from the Shadowthorn were fading fast, corrupted by her own body's attempt to neutralize the poison. In another day, maybe two, she wouldn't be able to tell him anything useful. But he didn't need to know that. Theron turned away, pacing to the window. She could see the war playing out across his shoulders, alpha pride versus alpha pragmatism. His son's life versus his own rules. The Pack Council will never approve, he said finally. Even if I wanted to grant your terms, and I'm not saying I do, the elders would block it. An Omega using the sacred pools? A rejected bond being investigated? They'd call it blasphemy. Then don't ask their permission. Elara's voice softened slightly. You're the Alpha King, Theron. Act like it. Your son's life is on the line. Your throne is under threat. Are you really going to let a bunch of elderly wolves dictate your choices? He didn't answer. Just stood there, staring out at the night sky, his shoulders tense. The door burst open. A man strode in, tall, broad-shouldered, with the bearing of a warrior and the eyes of someone who'd seen too much death. Theron's beta, if Elara remembered correctly. She'd seen him once or twice during her brief time in the pack. Your Majesty, we have a situation. The beta stopped dead, his eyes locking onto Elara. All the color drained from his face. Impossible. Marcus. Theron's voice carried a warning. Not now. But Marcus wasn't listening. He moved closer to the bed, his eyes wide with something between shock and awe. Princess Elara. He dropped to one knee beside her bed, his head bowed. You're alive. After all these years, you're actually alive. Everything stopped. Elara stared at the beta, her heart hammering. What did you just call me? Princess Elara of the Silvermoon Pack. Marcus looked up at her, tears shining in his eyes. I served your father before the fall. Before the massacre. We all thought you died with the rest of the royal family. I don't know what you're talking about. But even as she said it, Elara felt something crack inside her. A memory, old and buried deep. I'm not a princess. I'm just. You have your mother's eyes, Marcus continued softly. And the royal marking on your left shoulder blade. The crescent moon birthmark that all Silvermoon heirs carry. Theron moved like lightning, grabbing his beta by the arm and hauling him away from the bed. Marcus, stand down. That's an order. But your Majesty, don't you understand what this means? Marcus pulled free, his voice rising. The Silvermoon Pack was one of the oldest bloodlines. Royal Omega line. When they fell 15 years ago, we thought the line was extinct. But if Princess Elara survived. I'm not a princess, Elara said again, but her voice wavered. 15 years ago. She'd been 7. Old enough to remember her parents, but too young to understand pack politics. She remembered running. Hiding. A woman with kind eyes, not her mother, telling her to forget everything. To become someone new. To survive. The Silvermoon Pack specialized in lunar magic, Marcus was saying, his words tumbling out faster now. Omega healing arts that went back centuries. When they fell, we lost most of that knowledge. But if you're alive, if you carry that bloodline. Marcus, that's enough. Theron's command cracked like a whip. Leave us. Now. But. Now. The beta hesitated, then bowed and backed out of the room. But the damage was done. The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Princess Elara of the fallen Silvermoon Pack. Royal bloodline. Omega heir. Theron turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd woken, he looked genuinely shaken. You knew, Elara breathed. Didn't you? 3 years ago, when I came to you claiming our bond. You knew who I was. I suspected, he admitted quietly. Your healing abilities were too advanced for a common Omega. The way you moved, the way you spoke, it reminded me of the Silvermoon royals I'd met as a child. And you rejected me anyway. Betrayal cut through her sharper than any poison. You knew I was the last of a royal bloodline, and you still. I rejected you because of it. The words exploded out of him, raw and pained. Don't you understand? The Silvermoon pack was massacred by the Shadow Court. Every member of the royal family was hunted down and killed. If anyone discovered you were alive, they would come for you. They would finish what they started. So you threw me out. Elara's voice shook. You rejected our bond and banished me to protect me? Is that what you're saying? I was trying to keep you safe. Theron moved closer, his hands gripping the bed rails again. If we'd bonded, if I'd acknowledged you as my mate, every enemy I have would have seen you as a target. The Shadow Court would have known exactly where to find the last Silvermoon heir. So I rejected you. I sent you away. I made sure no one would connect you to the throne. And you never thought to ask me? Anger burned through her, hot and bright. To let me make that choice? You were 20 years old and naive about pack politics. You didn't understand the danger. I understood that the man who was supposed to be my mate looked at me with hatred and told me I wasn't worthy. Tears burned Elara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I understood that I spent 3 years alone in the forest, thinking I was worthless. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Theron's expression cracked, showing the pain beneath. I'm sorry. Elara, I'm so sorry. But if I had told you the truth, if I had let you stay, they would have found me eventually anyway. She laughed bitterly. Your beta just recognized me after 15 years. How long do you think it would take trained assassins? Which is why we need to move quickly. Theron straightened, alpha mode sliding back into place. Marcus will report what he saw. The information will spread. If the Shadow Court has spies in this palace, and after what you told me about the Shadow Thorn, I have to assume they do, they'll know you're here within hours. Then it's a good thing I'm already dying from poison. Elara closed her eyes, suddenly more exhausted than she'd ever been. Saves them the trouble. You're not dying. Theron's voice turned hard. I won't allow it. You'll have your terms, Elara. All 3 of them. Access to the lunar pools tonight. Your healer's rights restored by morning. And a formal investigation into our bond rejection, witnessed by the Pack Council. She opened her eyes, searching his face for the lie. Why? Because Marcus is right. If you're the last of the Silvermoon line, if you carry their knowledge of lunar magic, then you're more valuable than any political alliance I could have made. He paused, something vulnerable crossing his features. And because I've spent 3 years regretting every word I said to you that day. Maybe it's time I stopped trying to protect you from a distance and started fighting for you instead. Pretty words, Elara said softly. But words don't remove silver chains. Theron reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. He unlocked the manacles, letting them fall away from her blistered wrists. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. The lunar pools are dangerous right now, he said as he worked. If the Shadow Court knows you're alive, they'll be watching the sacred grounds. We'll need guards. Protection. I can protect myself. Against a squad of assassins while weakened by Shadowthorn poison? He raised an eyebrow. Your pride will get you killed. My pride kept me alive for 3 years. And my protection will keep you alive for 3 more. He finished removing the second manacle and gently took her hand, examining the blistered skin. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The assassins moved like smoke, silent, deadly, and impossibly fast. Elara didn't think. She reacted. Her hand shot out, grabbing the water pitcher from the bedside table and hurling it at the nearest attacker. It shattered against his mask, buying her half a second. She rolled off the opposite side of the bed, hitting the floor hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. The shadowthorn poison screamed through her veins in protest, but adrenaline was a hell of a painkiller. Theron was already in motion, his alpha strength making him a blur of controlled violence. He caught the first assassin's blade on his forearm, his skin was thick enough to deflect silver, and drove his fist into the man's throat. The assassin went down choking. But the other two were focused on Alara. She scrambled backward as a silver dagger sliced the air where her head had been. Her back hit the wall. Trapped. The assassin advanced, raising the blade for a killing strike. Glass crunched behind him. The assassin turned just as Theron grabbed him by the neck and slammed him into the floor with enough force to crack stone. The man went limp. The third assassin hesitated, weighing odds that had suddenly turned against him. Then he dove back through the broken window, disappearing into the night. Guards! Theron roared. Lock down the palace. Now! Footsteps thundered in the corridor. The door burst open, guards pouring in with weapons drawn. But Alara barely noticed them. She was staring at the fallen assassins, at the shadowthorn-coated blades still clutched in their hands. They came for me specifically, she said quietly. The poison on those weapons, it's the same compound that infected Caden. Someone wants to make very sure I die. Theron crossed to her, his eyes scanning for injuries. Are you hurt? No. But we're out of time. She pushed herself up the wall, ignoring the way her legs shook. If they're willing to attack inside the Royal Medical Wing, they're desperate. Whatever conspiracy we're dealing with, we just accelerated their timeline. Which means we need to accelerate ours. Theron turned to his guards. I want these bodies in the dungeon for interrogation. Wake my interrogators, I don't care what time it is. And send for me, brother. A woman strode through the doorway, and Alara's first thought was that she looked like winter personified. Tall and lean, with ice-blonde hair pulled back in a severe braid and eyes the same cold blue as Theron's. She wore fighting leathers and carried a sword like she knew exactly how to use it. Lissa. Relief flickered across Theron's face. Good. I need you to escort the Omega to the lunar pools. I know. Lissa's gaze raked over Alara with obvious disdain. Marcus told me everything. A Silvermoon princess. Hard to believe, looking at her. Lissa, Theron warned. What? I'm just saying she doesn't look very royal, covered in blood and cowering against a wall. The woman's smile was sharp enough to cut. But I suppose Omegas can't help being weak. It's in their nature. Alara straightened, meeting that cold gaze with her own. And I suppose alphas can't help being arrogant assholes. Must be in yours. Silence. Then Lissa laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, I like her. She's got teeth. The woman moved closer, circling Alara like a predator evaluating prey. Fine. I'll keep her alive long enough to reach the pools. But after that, brother, she's your problem. She'll be under your protection until the healing ritual is complete, Theron said firmly. And Lissa? If anything happens to her. You'll what? Challenge your own sister? Lissa snorted. Relax. I said I'd keep her alive, and I will. I always honor my contracts, even the annoying ones. She grabbed Alara's arm, not gently, and hauled her toward the door. Wait. Theron caught Alara's other arm, pulling her back for a moment. His voice dropped low, meant only for her. Lissa is ruthless and she hates Omegas, but she's the best fighter in my guard. If anyone can get you to the pools safely, it's her. Trust that, even if you can't trust anything else. Trust. Alara looked up at him, at the concern written across his features. 3 years ago, he'd looked at her with nothing but cold rejection. Now he looked at her like she was precious. Breakable. The whiplash was making her dizzy. That's asking a lot. I know. His hand tightened briefly on her arm. But I'm asking anyway. Then Lissa was dragging her into the corridor, moving fast enough that Alara had to jog to keep up. Guards fell into formation around them, 6 warriors, all heavily armed. The pools are on the east side of the palace, Lissa said briskly. We'll take the servant corridors to avoid attention. Anyone we encounter, you stay behind me and keep your mouth shut. Understood? Perfectly. Alara matched her pace despite the poison burning through her veins. Though I have to ask, what did Omegas ever do to you? Besides being weak, pathetic, and generally useless? Lissa turned a corner sharply. Let's see. An Omega healer failed to save my mother during childbirth. An Omega advisor convinced my father to sign a peace treaty that got him killed. And an Omega. She stopped abruptly, her jaw tightening. An Omega what? Alara pressed. Nothing. Lissa resumed walking. The point is, Omegas bring nothing but death and weakness to any pack they touch. The fact that your royal bloodline doesn't change that. They descended a narrow staircase, the air growing colder. These were the old parts of the palace, Alara realized. Stone walls that had stood for centuries, barely touched by modern renovation. Your brother doesn't seem to share your opinion, she said. That's just biology. Is it? Alara stopped walking, forcing Lissa to turn back. I drew lethal poison out of a child's body and into my own. I survived 3 years alone in the Forbidden Forest. I fought off your brother's rejection and built a life from nothing. Does that sound weak to you? Lissa studied her for a long moment. It sounds like you got lucky. Repeatedly. Or maybe your understanding of Omegas is wrong. Maybe. The other woman's expression didn't change. Or maybe you're the exception that proves the rule. Either way, we don't have time for philosophy. The pools are just ahead, and we're running out of night. They emerged into an open courtyard, and Alara's breath caught. The lunar pools sat at the center of a stone grove, 5 circular pools arranged like a crescent moon. Water glowed with soft silver light, reflecting the moon overhead. Ancient runes were carved into the stone surrounding each pool, and the air hummed with power, old magic that predated the modern pacts. Beautiful, Alara whispered. Sacred, Lissa corrected sharply. These pools have been used for royal ceremonies for 1,000 years. The fact that my brother is letting a rejected Omega bathe in them is borderline sacrilege. Then maybe your sacred traditions need updating. Alara moved toward the largest pool, feeling the pull of lunar magic. It called to her Omega nature like a song only she could hear. How long do I have? 3 hours until dawn. After that, the magic fades and the pools are just water. Lissa positioned herself at the pool's edge, her hand resting on her sword. My guards will secure the perimeter. I'll watch you. Try anything suspicious, and I'll drag you out myself. Define suspicious. Anything that looks like Omega magic corruption. Dark casting. Blood rituals. The usual Omega nonsense. Alara bit back a sharp response. Fighting with Lissa wouldn't help anyone. Instead, she focused on the pool, on the healing she desperately needed. She stripped off her bloodied medical gown, modesty was a luxury she couldn't afford, and stepped into the water. It was warm. Alara gasped and broke the surface of the water, coughing. The vision faded, but the image of that mark remained burned into her mind. Lord Fennec. The man who'd been pushing for war with the neighboring pack. The man who stood at Theron's right hand during every council meeting. The man who tried to murder the Alpha King's heir. What happened? Lissa had her sword drawn, her eyes scanning the courtyard for threats. You went under and started glowing. Then you screamed. What did you see? A memory. Alara pulled herself to the pool's edge, her body still shaking from the vision. The water showed me Caden's poisoning. I saw who did it. Then tell me. Not you. Theron. Elara climbed out of the pool, water streaming from her skin. The shadowthorn poison was gone, she could feel its absence like a weight lifted from her chest, but exhaustion replaced it. I need to speak with your brother. Now. You need to finish the healing ritual. The ritual is done. The poison is neutralized. Elara grabbed her discarded gown and pulled it on, ignoring Lissa's protests. But if I'm right about what I saw, then Caden is still in danger. The traitor isn't some outside enemy. He's in your brother's inner circle. Lissa's expression hardened. You're accusing someone in the court? I'm accusing Lord Fennec of attempted murder and treason. The words hung in the air between them. Lissa stared at her, clearly weighing whether to believe an Omega she barely knew or her brother's trusted advisor. Finally, she sheathed her sword. If you're wrong, then I'll face the consequences. But if I'm right, and we don't act now, whoever sent those assassins will try again. Elara met the other woman's eyes. How many more attacks can your nephew survive? That decided it. Lissa turned to her guards. Double time back to the royal wing. And someone wake Lord Fennec. Tell him the Alpha King requires his immediate presence. They moved quickly through the palace corridors, but as they approached the royal quarters, a small voice stopped them. Moon Lady. Elara turned to find Caden running toward her, still in his nightclothes, trailed by a frantic-looking nursemaid. The boy threw himself at Elara's legs, hugging her with the fierce intensity only children could manage. You're alive. Father said you were sick, but you're all better now and you saved me. And he looked up at her with those pale gold eyes, so much like Theron's. You smell like my real mother. The corridor went silent. Elara knelt down slowly, bringing herself to Caden's eye level. Your real mother? The one who died when I was born. Caden touched her face with small, curious hands. Father doesn't like to talk about her. But the servants whisper. They say she was an Omega like you, and that she smelled like moonlight and honey. You smell the same. Caden. Theron's voice cut through the moment like a blade. He strode toward them, his expression thunderous. What did I tell you about leaving your chambers at night? But father, the Moon Lady is here. And she's... Go. Back. To. Bed. Each word was precisely enunciated, leaving no room for argument. Now. Caden's lower lip trembled, but he obeyed, letting the nursemaid lead him away. But he looked back at Elara over his shoulder, his eyes pleading. Don't go, that look said. Don't leave me like she did. We need to talk, Elara said quietly once the boy was gone. About your late mate. About Lord Fennec. About the conspiracy that goes much deeper than either of us realized. Theron's jaw tightened. Not here. My study. Now. They moved through the palace in tense silence, Lissa and the guards trailing behind. But as they passed the great hall, Elara heard something that made her stop. Singing. Soft and haunting, coming from somewhere below. An Omega's voice, layered with lunar magic and despair. What is that? She demanded. Nothing, Theron said quickly. Too quickly. Just the wind. That's not wind. That's a healing song. Elara pulled away from him, following the sound to a door half hidden behind a tapestry. That's an Omega in pain. Elara, don't. But she was already opening the door, already descending the stairs beyond. The singing grew louder, joined by others. Not just one Omega. Several. The stairs led to a dungeon. And in the cells lining the walls, Elara found them. Omegas. At least a dozen, maybe more. All of them emaciated, pale, their skin marked with strange scars and burn marks. Medical equipment surrounded them, tubes and vials and machines designed to extract something. Their lunar magic. Someone was draining these Omegas, harvesting their power for experiments. What the hell is this? Elara turned on Theron, rage making her voice shake. You're keeping Omegas as prisoners? Draining their magic? And you had the audacity to lecture me about sacred traditions? I didn't know. Theron looked as shocked as she felt. Elara, I swear to you, I didn't know these cells existed. This level of the palace has been sealed for decades. Clearly not sealed enough. Lissa had gone pale, her hand on her sword. Brother, if this is discovered. It won't be discovered because we're shutting it down right now. Theron's voice was steel. Get these Omegas to the medical wing. Feed them, clothe them, and find out who's been holding them here. I want names. I can give you one name, said a voice from the shadows. An older Omega emerged from one of the cells, his face gaunt but his eyes sharp. Lord Fennec runs these experiments. He's been harvesting Omega magic for years, trying to create artificial power for non-Omega wolves. He calls it Project Ascension. And he's been doing it with royal approval, another Omega added bitterly. Your late mate, Alpha King? She didn't die in childbirth. Lord Fennec murdered her when she discovered these dungeons. Staged it to look like birth complications. The world tilted. Elara watched Theron's face drain of color, watched him process words that were clearly destroying something inside him. Mira, he whispered. He killed Mira? Drained her magic first, the older Omega said. Then poisoned her to make it look natural. Your son survived only because she used the last of her strength to push him out before the poison reached him. He paused. And Lord Fennec has been working to eliminate any Omega who might discover his work ever since. Including you, Princess Elara. That's why you rejected me. Elara looked at Theron, understanding crashing through her. 3 years ago, you didn't reject me because I was weak or unworthy. You rejected me because you knew I'd be next. Because anyone who got close to you would become a target. I couldn't watch another Omega die because of me, Theron said hoarsely. I couldn't watch you die. So I pushed you away. Made you hate me. Thought if you were far from the palace, far from my life, you'd be safe. You were wrong. Elara moved closer to him, her voice softening despite her anger. Because Lord Fennec already knew about me. Already knew I was Silvermoon bloodline. He's probably known for years. And the moment I showed up with Caden's poison in my veins, he realized I was the one threat he couldn't eliminate from a distance. So he sent assassins. And when that failed, he'll try something else. Elara glanced at the imprisoned Omegas, at the horrific equipment designed to harvest their power. This Project Ascension, if Fennec perfects it, he won't need Omega bloodlines anymore. He can create artificial lunar magic. Which means he can create artificial royal power, Lissa finished grimly. Enough power to challenge an Alpha King. Maybe even enough to start a war and seize the throne in the chaos. We need to arrest him, Theron said. Now. Before he realizes we know. Too late for that, I'm afraid. Lord Fennec stood at the top of the dungeon stairs, flanked by a dozen guards in black armor. He smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd just cornered his prey. I really hoped you'd stay in the medical wing and die quietly, Princess Elara. Would have made this so much easier. He descended the stairs slowly, his hand resting on an ornate dagger at his belt. But I suppose I should thank you. You've gathered all my problems in one convenient location. The last Silvermoon heir. The suspicious Alpha King. Even his troublesome sister. You won't leave this room alive, Theron growled. Won't I? Fennec gestured, and his guards advanced. I have 20 warriors loyal to me personally. You have your sister, a dying Omega, and a dozen half-starved prisoners. The math seems clear. You're forgetting something, Elara said quietly. And what's that? Those half-starved prisoners? She looked at the Omegas emerging from their cells, at the anger and determination in their eyes. They're not prisoners anymore. And you're standing between them and their freedom. The Omegas attacked as one, their combined lunar magic making the air shimmer with silver light. And as chaos erupted in the dungeon, as steel clashed and power surged, Heir realized something crucial. This wasn't just about catching a traitor anymore. This was war. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The dungeon erupted into chaos. Silver light blazed as the freed Omegas channeled their combined magic, weak as they were. It wasn't much, years of draining had left them shadows of what they should have been, but desperation made them fierce. One Omega, a young woman with burned scars covering her arms, sent a pulse of lunar energy that knocked two of Fennec's guards off their feet. Another, the older male who'd spoken earlier, created a barrier of shimmering light between the prisoners and their captors. But Fennec's warriors were trained killers, and there were too many of them. Theron moved like a force of nature, his alpha strength making him nearly unstoppable. He caught the first guard's sword on his forearm, his skin thick enough to deflect the blade, and drove his fist into the man's chest hard enough to crack ribs. The guard went down. Lissa fought beside him, her movements precise and deadly. She was smaller than the male warriors, but faster, and she used that to her advantage. Her sword found gaps in armor, struck vulnerable joints, turned killing blows into glancing strikes. Heir had no weapon, no combat training. But she had something else. She had Omega magic, fresh from the lunar pools and singing in her veins. She thrust her hands forward, channeling power the way her instincts demanded. Silver light burst from her palms, catching three guards in a web of energy. They froze, their muscles locking, their weapons clattering to the stone floor. Impossible, Fennec breathed, his eyes widening. You shouldn't have that much power. Not after the Shadow Thorn. The pools don't just heal, Heir said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. They amplify. Every Omega knows that. But you wouldn't, would you? Because you're not an Omega. You're just a parasite trying to steal what you can never earn. Rage twisted Fennec's features. He pulled the ornate dagger from his belt, and Heir saw the blade gleam with familiar black residue. Shadow Thorn. Of course. If I can't have Omega power, Fennec snarled, then neither will you. He lunged. Theron intercepted him, catching Fennec's wrist and twisting hard. The dagger clattered away. But Fennec was stronger than he looked, enhanced somehow, probably by the same stolen magic he'd been harvesting. He broke Theron's grip and drove his elbow into the Alpha King's face. Blood sprayed. Theron staggered back. Brother. Lissa started toward him, but more guards blocked her path. Fennec grabbed Heir by the throat, his fingers digging into her skin. You should have died in the forest. Should have died with the rest of your worthless bloodline. Black spots danced across Heir's vision. She clawed at his hands, but he was too strong. Enhanced. The stolen Omega magic in his system gave him unnatural strength. The Silvermoon pack was a disease, Fennec hissed, his face inches from hers. Weak Omegas who thought their magic made them special. Your father actually believed Omegas deserved council seats. Council seats. Can you imagine? My father. Heir choked out, was right. She drove her knee into Fennec's stomach with every ounce of strength she had left. He grunted, his grip loosening just enough. Heir twisted free, gasping for air, and channeled her magic again. But this time, she didn't aim for Fennec. She aimed for the ceiling. The ancient stone groaned as lunar magic surged through it. Cracks spider-webbed across the dungeon roof. Dust rained down. Everyone out. Theron roared. Now. The Omegas fled up the stairs, supported by Lissa's guards. Theron grabbed Heir's arm, pulling her toward the exit as the ceiling began to collapse. But Fennec wasn't finished. He lunged one more time, Shadowthorn dagger aimed for Heir's back. Lissa's sword took him through the shoulder. Fennec screamed, stumbling backward as stone fell around him. The last thing Alara saw before Theron hauled her through the doorway was Fennec's face, twisted with rage and pain, disappearing beneath tons of rubble. They collapsed in the corridor above, coughing dust from their lungs. Behind them, the dungeon entrance was completely blocked. "Is he dead?" one of the guards asked. "If he's not, he won't be getting out anytime soon." Lissa wiped her blade clean, her expression grim. "But this isn't over." Fennec wouldn't have acted alone. He was too cautious for that. He'd have allies, contingency plans. "Evidence," the older Omega interrupted. He'd made it up the stairs despite his weakened state, and now he leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Fennec kept records. Detailed documentation of everything, the murders, the experiments, the coup plans. He was obsessed with proving his genius to posterity. "Where?" Theron demanded. "His study. But he'll have had someone release it the moment things went wrong. Insurance against betrayal." The Omega's expression darkened. "And the most damaging evidence isn't about his experiments. It's about Princess Alara." Alara's stomach dropped. "What about me?" "Your bloodline. The Silver Moon Massacre." The Omega met her eyes with something like pity. Fennec discovered the truth about what really happened 20 years ago. And if that information goes public... He didn't need to finish. Alara could see it in Theron's face, in Lissa's sudden tension. Whatever truth Fennec had found, it was bad enough to destroy everything. They moved quickly through the palace, the freed Omegas following under guard. But as they rounded a corner near the Great Hall, they found their path blocked by nobles in formal court dress. At least 30 of them, all wearing expressions of cold judgment. At their head stood Lady Morgana, the eldest member of the Pack Council. She was ancient, her hair white as winter snow, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. "Alpha King Theron," she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "We have just received some very disturbing information regarding the woman you've brought into our palace." "Not now, Morgana. It cannot wait." The old woman's gaze shifted to Alara, and there was something almost hungry in her eyes. "Is it true? Are you Princess Alara of the Silver Moon Pack? The sole survivor of the massacre?" Silence fell like a blade. "You would break the very laws your father died to uphold?" "My father was a tyrant who murdered innocent Omegas to consolidate his power." Theron's voice was steel. "And I will not continue his legacy of genocide." The Silver Moon Pack was not guilty of treason. They were guilty of demanding equality. And they were slaughtered for it. The nobles erupted in outrage. Voices rose, shouting accusations and demands. The fragile alliance that held the pack together was fracturing before Alara's eyes. "Enough." Lady Morgana's voice cut through the chaos. "Alpha King Theron, if you refuse to execute this Omega, then you leave us no choice. As head of the Pack Council, I invoke the ancient right of no confidence. We will vote on your fitness to rule." "You can't be serious." Half the noble families have already pledged their support to the motion. Morgana smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. "You have until dawn to produce evidence that Princess Alara is innocent of her bloodline's crimes. Otherwise, we vote. And if you lose, both your crown and your protection of the Omega are forfeit." She swept away, the other nobles following like sharks scenting blood. The corridor emptied, leaving only Theron's inner circle. Lissa swore viciously. The guards looked uncertain, caught between loyalty to their king and the will of the council. "This is Fennec's endgame," Alara said quietly. "He knew if he revealed my identity, it would destroy your political support. Force you to choose between me and your throne. Then he underestimated me." Theron turned to her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I don't care about the throne. I care about you. I've always cared about you, even when I couldn't show it." "Theron. No. Listen to me." He took her hands, his touch gentle despite his strength. 3 years ago, when you came to me claiming our bond, I wanted nothing more than to accept it. You were everything I'd ever hoped for in a mate. Strong, fierce, compassionate. But my father discovered our connection before I could act. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. What did he do? He gave me a choice. Theron's voice roughened with old pain. Reject you publicly, make you hate me, drive you away. Or watch him execute every Omega in the kingdom. Starting with the ones in the medical wing. The children in the schools. He would have burned them all, Elara. And he would have made me watch. No. The word escaped as a whisper. Theron, no. I chose the many over the one. I chose to save hundreds by destroying the one person who mattered most to me. His hands tightened on hers. I rejected you in front of the pack. I said terrible things, things I knew would make you leave and never come back. And then I watched you walk away, knowing I'd just killed the best thing that ever happened to me. Tears burned Elara's eyes. You should have told me. We could have fought him together. He would have killed you first. Made it look like an accident. Theron released one of her hands to cup her face. So I let you go. Let you think I was cruel and heartless. And then I spent 3 years watching over you from a distance, making sure you stayed safe in that forest, making sure my father's guards never found you. The wolves I sometimes sensed nearby, Elara breathed. The ones who never attacked. That was you. Every week. Sometimes more often, when I couldn't stand being away. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. And when my father died 6 months ago, I wanted to go to you. To explain everything. But by then, I'd heard rumors of Fennec's experiments. I knew there were threats I hadn't identified yet. So I stayed away. Kept you safe by keeping you hidden. Until I saved Caden. Until you saved Caden. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You couldn't just stay hidden, could you? Had to go and be heroic. It's a character flaw, Elara managed, though her voice shook. It's one of the things I love about you. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elara stared at him, at this man who'd broken her heart to save her life, who'd spent years protecting her from the shadows. I don't understand, she whispered. If you rejected the bond, if you went through the ritual, then how? She stopped. Because something was happening. Something impossible. Heat bloomed in her chest, spreading outward like sunrise. She could feel Theron, not just his hands on her skin, but his emotions, his thoughts, his very essence. The mate bond, dormant for 3 years, suddenly flared to life with such intensity that she gasped. And through that connection, she saw everything. A young Theron, no more than 18, standing before his father's throne as the old Alpha King laid out his ultimatum. Reject the Omega or watch hundreds die. Theron in the forest, hidden in the shadows, watching Elara gather herbs. His face twisted with longing and grief. Theron holding his infant son, whispering promises that he would never let Caden grow up in fear the way he had. That he would build a better kingdom, if he only got the chance. Theron the night his father died, finally free but too broken to know how to fix what he destroyed. The visions faded, but the bond remained. Stronger than before. Undeniable. True mates, Elara breathed. We're true mates. The rejection ritual didn't break it because it can't be broken. Not this kind of bond. I suspected. Theron's voice was rough with emotion. But I didn't know for certain until now. True mate bonds are so rare. They're legend. Lissa had gone pale, staring at them both. Brother, if you're true mates, then the council can't force you to give her up. True mate bonds supersede pack law. It's one of the oldest rules. Which means Fennec's plan just fell apart. Hope sparked in Elara's chest. We can prove I'm your true mate. The council will have to accept. Lord Fennec's plan, maybe. A new voice cut through the moment. But not mine. They turned as one. Lissa stood 20 feet away, her sword drawn. But she wasn't pointing it at the nobles or some unseen enemy. She was pointing it at Theron. "I'm sorry, brother," she said softly. "But I really can't let you keep the throne. I've worked too hard for this." The world tilted. Elara stared at the woman who'd escorted her to the lunar pools, who'd fought beside them in the dungeon, who'd saved her from Fennec's blade. Seeing her now as if for the first time. "It was you," she whispered. "You're the co-conspirator. You've been working with Fennec all along. Not with him. Above him." Lissa's smile was cold. Fennec was a useful tool, but he was always too ambitious. Too obvious. I knew he'd eventually make a mistake that would expose us both. So I made sure his mistakes would only expose him. "The shadow thorn in Caden's wound," Theron said, his voice deadly quiet. "That was you. You poisoned my son. Your son was never in real danger. I knew you'd call for a healer. I knew Elara was in the forest. I'd been tracking her movements for months." Lissa's eyes glittered. "I just needed her to reveal herself. To step out of hiding and give me the excuse I needed to bring her here. To the palace. Where I could finally harvest the last Silvermoon heir." Horror crashed through Elara. "The Omega prisoners. You weren't just draining their magic. You were trying to steal their bloodlines. Trying to give yourself Omega abilities. Trying and succeeding." Lissa's free hand began to glow with silver light, weak, corrupted, but undeniably Omega magic. "It took years of research. Hundreds of test subjects. But I finally perfected the process 6 months ago. Right before our father died." Theron's face went white. "You killed him. He was dying anyway. I just accelerated the process." Lissa shrugged. "He was weak. Sentimental. He'd started talking about reforms, about making peace with Omega communities. About undoing the very laws that kept us strong. I couldn't allow that. So you poisoned him." Fury radiated from Theron. "Just like you poisoned Mira. Just like you tried to poison Caden. Mira discovered my laboratory. She was always too curious for her own good." Lissa's expression didn't change. "And yes, I staged her death to look like childbirth complications. It was surprisingly easy. People expect Omegas to die in childbirth. It's practically tradition." Elara wanted to be sick. Wanted to rage and scream and tear this woman apart with her bare hands. But she forced herself to stay calm, to think strategically. "The noble families," she said. "Lady Morgana. They're working with you. Half of them, yes. The smart half." Lissa gestured with her sword. "They understand that Omega power combined with Alpha strength could make our pack unstoppable. We could conquer the neighboring territories, expand our borders, build an empire. But not with Theron on the throne. He's too soft. Too worried about ethics and fairness. Too worried about not being a genocidal tyrant," Theron corrected coldly. "Semantics." Lissa's smile widened. "Which is why I'm afraid I need you to abdicate. Publicly. Before the dawn vote. Sign the throne over to me, name me regent for Caden until he comes of age, and I'll let you live. Refuse, and I'll kill you and take it anyway. Either option works for me. You won't touch him." Elara stepped forward, her own magic rising. "I won't let you. You won't have a choice." Lissa raised her voice. "Captain Reeves? You can bring them in now." Guards poured into the corridor. Not Theron's loyalists, these wore black armor marked with Lissa's personal crest. At least 50 of them, all heavily armed. And in the center of the formation, held by a guard with a knife to his throat, was Caden. The boy's eyes were wide with terror. "Father? Moon Lady?" "Let him go," Theron snarled. "Lissa, let him go right now." "I'll let him go when you sign the abdication papers." Lissa produced a document from her belt. "It's very simple, brother. Your crown and your son's life. Or your pride and your son's funeral. Choose quickly. I'm not a patient woman. Elara could feel Theron's anguish through their bond, sharp enough to cut. He was weighing options, running through scenarios, trying to find a way to save everyone. But there was no way. Not with Caden's life on the line. Don't do it, Elara said quietly. Theron, don't sign. She'll kill us all anyway. You know she will. Maybe. Lyssa tilted her head. Or maybe I really will let you live. Exiled, powerless, but alive. Wouldn't that be nice? Growing old together in some remote cabin, far from all this political mess? You're lying. Elara held Lyssa's gaze. You can't let us live. Not when we know what you've done. Not when we could expose you. True. Lyssa's smile turned sharp. But I thought I'd offer the illusion of choice. It seems more civilized. She nodded to the guard holding Caden. The knife pressed deeper against the boy's throat, drawing blood. Last chance, brother. Sign. Or watch your son die the way you watched your mate die. And as Theron reached for the document, his hands shaking with rage and helplessness, Elara felt something shift through their mate bond. Not surrender. Not despair. Strategy. Theron was planning something. She could feel it taking shape in his mind, desperate, dangerous, and possibly suicidal. But it was a plan. And right now, that was all they had. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. Time slowed to a crawl. Elara watched the knife press deeper into Caden's throat, saw the terror in the boy's eyes, felt Theron's anguish crash through their bond like a tidal wave. In seconds, the Alpha King would sign away his throne to save his son. And then Lyssa would kill them all anyway, because that was what monsters did. Unless Elara acted first. She closed her eyes and reached for the mate bond, not just the surface connection, but the depths of it. The true mate bond that couldn't be broken, that transcended pack law and rejection rituals. Through that connection, she touched Theron's mind. Trust me, she sent. When I move, you move. She felt his surprise, then understanding. Then agreement. Elara's eyes snapped open, and she channeled every ounce of lunar magic she'd absorbed from the sacred pools. Silver light exploded from her body, so bright that everyone in the corridor threw up their hands to shield their eyes. Including the guard holding Caden. Theron moved like lightning. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, grabbed his son, and rolled behind a pillar as Lyssa's forces opened fire. Not with arrows, with something worse. Darts tipped with shadowthorn, dozens of them, filling the air like deadly rain. But Elara was ready. She threw up a barrier of lunar magic, the same way the old Omega had done in the dungeon. The darts hit the shimmering wall and fell harmlessly to the ground. It wouldn't hold long, she could already feel the strain, but it didn't need to hold long. Just long enough. The dungeons, she shouted to the freed Omegas who'd been watching in horror. The prisoners are still down there, the ones who can still fight. We need them. Now. The older Omega didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, taking half the group with him. The others formed up around Elara, adding their magic to hers. Weak as they were, together they strengthened the barrier. You can't win this, Lyssa called out, her voice amused. I have 50 warriors. You have a handful of half-dead Omegas and a king who's too soft to kill his own sister. How exactly do you think this ends? With you stripped of your stolen power and locked in the deepest cell we have, Theron snarled. He'd positioned Caden safely behind the pillar and now stood at the barrier's edge, his eyes blazing with alpha fury. You murdered my mate. You poisoned my son. You're a traitor and a monster, Lyssa. And I will see you pay for every life you've destroyed. Big words from a man hiding behind Omega magic. Lyssa raised her hand, and corrupted silver light gathered in her palm. Let me show you what real power looks like. She unleashed a bolt of stolen magic directly at the barrier. The impact nearly drove Alara to her knees. The other Omegas cried out, their combined power fracturing under the assault. Lissa's stolen magic was wrong, twisted and corrupted, but it was strong. Stronger than anything Alara had faced before. Again, Lissa ordered. Break them. Another bolt. Then another. The barrier cracked like glass, silver light fragmenting into 1,000 pieces. I can't hold it, Alara gasped. There are too many. Then we fight. Theron grabbed a fallen guard's sword and stepped through the failing barrier. For the kingdom. For our son. For every Omega you murdered in the name of power. He charged. Lissa met him with a smile, her stolen magic coating her like armor. Their blades clashed, and the sound rang through the corridor like a bell. But even with his alpha strength, Theron was outmatched. Lissa had been absorbing Omega magic for years, layer upon layer of stolen power making her faster, stronger, nearly invincible. She drove him back with a blast of corrupted light. Theron hit the wall hard enough to crack stone. Blood ran from his mouth. No. Alara dropped the barrier and ran to him. Behind her, Lissa's guards advanced, weapons raised. Touching, Lissa said. The true mates, dying together. There's a certain poetry to it. There's nothing poetic about murder, said a new voice. The older Omega had returned, and he'd brought an army. They poured up from the lower levels like a silver tide. Not just the prisoners from Phoenix Dungeon, but others. Omegas from throughout the palace, servants, healers, scholars, who'd been living in secret, hiding their true natures to survive. Dozens of them, maybe more, all channeling lunar magic in unified fury. The corridor blazed with silver light. Lissa's guards fell back, overwhelmed. Some dropped their weapons and ran. Others tried to fight and found themselves frozen by Omega power, their muscles locked, their weapons useless. But Lissa herself stood firm, her stolen magic shielding her from the assault. Impressive, she admitted. You've been busy recruiting. But it won't be enough. You're fighting years of accumulated power with the dregs of Omega society. You can't win. Maybe not alone, Alara said. She helped Theron to his feet, feeling his pain echo through their bond. But we're not alone anymore. She turned to face the assembled Omegas. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. You've been drained, tortured, forced to hide who you are just to survive. But right now, we have a chance to change everything. To take back what was stolen. To prove that Omega magic isn't weak, it's the oldest power in the pack world. The most sacred. And it's time we reminded everyone of that. Pretty speech, Lissa called. But speeches won't stop me. No, Alara agreed. But this will. She reached for Theron's hand, their fingers interlocking. Through their bond, she felt his question, his concern. And she answered with absolute certainty. The true mate bonding ceremony, she said quietly, so only he could hear. It's the only way to amplify our power enough to stop her. You know that. If we complete the ceremony, our lives bind permanently. Theron's grip tightened on her hand. If one of us dies, the other follows. I know. Alara met his eyes, seeing her own determination reflected back. But if we don't try, Lissa wins. She takes the throne, she continues her experiments, and everything we've fought for dies anyway. At least this way, we fight together. You could still run, Theron said desperately. Take Caden and the other Omegas and disappear. I could hold her off long enough. I'm not running. Not anymore. Alara cupped his face with her free hand. 3 years ago, you sacrificed our bond to save others. Let me return the favor. Let me choose you. Let me choose us. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Thought his protective instincts would override everything else. But then something shifted in his expression, acceptance mixed with fierce love. Together, he said. Together. They turned to face Lissa as one, their hands still joined. And Elara began to speak the ancient words she'd learned as a child, before the massacre, when her mother had still been alive to teach her. By moon and blood, by soul and bone, I claim this bond as mine alone. Theron answered in the Alpha tongue, his voice resonating with power. By strength and will, by heart and sword, I pledge my life to stand as ward. Their magic rose, silver and gold, Omega and Alpha, intertwining like threads in a tapestry. The air between them shimmered, reality itself bending around the force of their union. By choice made free, by love made true, Elara continued, her voice growing stronger, I bind my fate to only you. Through death and life, through joy and pain, Theron responded, our souls as one shall long remain. The magic intensified, spreading outward in waves. Every Omega in the corridor gasped as they felt it, the raw power of a true mate bond being completed, something that hadn't happened in generations. Lissa's smile finally faltered. No. No, you can't. We accept this bond, Elara and Theron said in unison. Let our union be witnessed by moon and pack. Let it be sealed by magic and blood. Let it be eternal. The magic detonated. Silver and gold light merged into something new, something that was neither Omega nor Alpha but both, a fusion of powers that shouldn't exist but did. It crashed over Lissa like a tsunami, stripping away her stolen magic layer by layer. She screamed, a sound of pure rage and agony. The corrupted power she'd spent years accumulating was being torn away, returned to its rightful owners. She fell to her knees, her body convulsing as decades of stolen life force fled her system. You can't do this, she shrieked. That power is mine. I earned it. You stole it, Elara said coldly. And now we're taking it back. The last of the corrupted magic left Lissa in a rush of black smoke. She collapsed, suddenly looking small and fragile without the stolen power sustaining her. Just a woman. Just a murderer. But the victory came at a cost. Elara felt her knees buckle as the combined magic drained her strength. Beside her, Theron staggered, his face going pale. The bonding ceremony had amplified their power, but it had also pushed them far beyond their limits. Elara, Theron reached for her, but his legs gave out. They fell together, the world spinning around them. Elara could hear voices shouting, felt hands trying to catch them. But it was all distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. This is it, she thought distantly. We won, but we're dying. Through their bond, she felt Theron's agreement. Felt his love and regret and fierce pride all tangled together. Felt him reaching for her even as darkness closed in. Then small hands pressed against both their chests. Elara's eyes fluttered open to find Caden kneeling between them, his pale gold eyes wide with determination. Silver light, pure and untainted, glowed from his palms. No, the boy said firmly. You don't get to die. You saved me. Now I save you. Caden, no, Theron tried to pull away, but he was too weak. You don't know how. Mother taught me. Caden's voice held absolute certainty. Before she died, she put her magic in me. To keep me safe. To make me strong. She said one day I'd need it to save someone important. The boy's magic poured into them, pure lunar power, untainted by corruption or theft. Elara gasped as it filled the hollow places inside her, knitting together the damage from the bonding ceremony. Beside her, she felt Theron's strength returning through their bond. How is this possible? One of the Omegas whispered. He's the Alpha King's son. He shouldn't have Omega magic. His mother was an Omega, Elara said softly, understanding dawning. Myra's bloodline was strong enough to pass down even through an Alpha mate. Caden isn't just Theron's heir. He's Myra's legacy. The boy's magic finally faded, leaving him exhausted but smiling. Did I do good? You did perfect. Elara pulled him into her arms, holding him close. Through their bond, she felt Theron's overwhelming love for his son, for both of them. They helped each other stand, leaning on one another for support. Around them, the corridor was chaos. Lyssa's supporters had fled or surrendered. The loyal guards were securing the prisoners. And the freed Omegas stood in a loose circle, watching Elara with something between awe and hope. "What happens now?" the older Omega asked. Before Elara could answer, Lady Morgana appeared at the corridor's end, flanked by the remaining council members. The old woman's expression was unreadable as she surveyed the scene, the defeated Lyssa, the freed Omegas, the true mates standing united. "Alpha King Theron," she said formally. "It appears there has been a development." "Several developments." Theron's arm tightened around Elara's waist. "My sister is a traitor who murdered the previous queen and attempted to seize the throne. Lord Fennec was her co-conspirator, running illegal experiments on captured Omegas. And the laws that allowed this to happen. The laws that permitted Omega oppression and sanctioned their enslavement, will be abolished by dawn." Silence. Then Lady Morgana did something Elara had never expected. She knelt. "The council recognizes the true mate bond between Alpha King Theron and Princess Elara of Silvermoon," the old woman said formally. "We acknowledge that Omega magic is sacred, not corrupt. And we pledge to support the new laws you propose." Just like that? Elara couldn't keep the suspicion from her voice. "Hours ago, you wanted me executed. Hours ago, I believed the lies we'd been fed for generations." Morgana's gaze was steady. "But you just proved that Omega power, when used properly, can save rather than destroy. You defeated a traitor who nearly toppled the throne. You freed dozens of prisoners. And you saved the Alpha King's life, along with his son's. The council would be foolish not to recognize your value." "My value," Elara repeated slowly. "Not my rights. Not my equality. My value as a tool." "Elara," Theron began. "No." She stepped forward, releasing his arm. "This is important. Lady Morgana, I appreciate your change of heart. But I won't accept tolerance. I won't accept conditional respect that only exists because I proved myself useful. If we're going to change this kingdom, we need to change it completely." She turned to address all the assembled Omegas, all the guards and nobles and servants watching from the shadows. For generations, Omegas have been treated as lesser. As weak. As something to be protected at best and exploited at worst. But we are none of those things. We are healers and teachers and scholars. We hold the oldest magic in the pack world. And we deserve more than scraps of respect tossed to us when we prove our worth. Her voice grew stronger, fueled by years of pain and rage and hope. "So here are my terms. Not requests, terms. The kingdom will establish Omega councils with real political power. Magic theft in any form will be outlawed and punished as murder. Omega sovereignty will be recognized, meaning no Omega can be forced into bonds or service against their will. And Omega history, the real history, including the Silvermoon Massacre, will be taught in every school, so future generations understand the cost of prejudice." "Those are significant changes," Lady Morgana said carefully. "They're necessary changes." Elara met the old woman's eyes. "And they're non-negotiable. Either we build a new kingdom based on equality, or we maintain the same corrupt system that allowed Lyssa and Fennec to murder innocents for decades. Your choice." Theron moved to stand beside her, his hand finding hers. "I support every word. These reforms will happen, with or without council approval. But it would be easier with your cooperation." Lady Morgana looked at the other council members. Silent communication passed between them, some agreement reached without words. Finally, she nodded. "The council will support the reforms. On one condition. I told you, these aren't negotiable. Our condition," Morgana continued, "is that you accept the role of Omega Queen. Not as Theron's consort. Not as a symbolic gesture. But as his equal, ruling alongside him with full authority. Elera's breath caught. What? You just demonstrated more leadership in one battle than most alphas show in a lifetime. Morgana's expression softened slightly. You led the Omegas in rebellion. You completed a true mate bond to save the kingdom. You established terms for reform with the confidence of a ruler. The pack needs you, Princess Elera. Not just as the Alpha King's mate, but as a queen in your own right. An Omega Queen. Elera tested the words, feeling their weight. That's never existed before. Then it's time it did. Theron squeezed her hand. I'm offering you more than acceptance, Elera. More than a place at my side. I'm offering you half the throne. Equal power. Equal authority. Be my queen. My partner. My co-ruler. She wanted to say yes. Everything in her wanted to accept, to take this chance at changing everything. But years of rejection had taught her to be careful. On my terms, she said quietly. I won't be a token Omega propped up to make the kingdom look progressive. I need real power. The ability to make decisions, command troops, establish laws. I need to know that if we disagree, my voice carries equal weight. It will. Theron's voice held absolute conviction. I swear it. On our bond, on my crown, on everything I hold sacred, you'll rule as my equal. No restrictions. No limitations. Elera looked at the assembled wolves. At the freed Omegas watching her with hope. At young Caden, who'd called her Moon Lady and saved her life. At Theron, who'd loved her enough to reject her, to protect her, to offer her everything. And she realized something profound. She'd spent 3 years in the forest thinking she was broken. Thinking she was rejected because she wasn't enough. But she'd never been the problem. The system was the problem. The laws were the problem. The prejudice was the problem. And now she had the power to change it all. I accept, she said. Not just for myself, but for every Omega who's been told they're weak. For every healer who's been dismissed. For every child taught they're less than. I accept the role of Omega Queen, and I swear I'll use that power to build a better kingdom. Cheers erupted from the Omegas. Even some of the guards joined in, their voices echoing through the corridor. Lady Morgana rose and bowed deeply. Then let it be recorded. On this night, the kingdom gains not just a queen, but a new era. Long live Alpha King Theron. Long live Omega Queen Elera. Long live the queen, the crowd echoed. Elera felt tears burn her eyes, but she blinked them back. There would be time for emotion later. Right now, there was work to do. First priority, she said, her voice carrying the authority of a ruler, medical care for all freed Omegas. Proper food, clean quarters, and healers who know what they're doing. Second, secure Lissa and Fennec, what's left of him. They'll stand trial for their crimes. Third. She stopped. Something was wrong. A wave of dizziness crashed over her, strong enough to make her sway. Nausea rose in her throat. Elera? Theron caught her arm. What's wrong? I don't know. Another wave. Stronger this time. I need to sit down. They helped her to a bench, concern radiating from Theron through their bond. One of the older Omega healers, a woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, knelt before her. May I? The healer asked. Elera nodded, not trusting her voice. The healer placed her hands on Elera's stomach, and silver light glowed softly between them. She held the position for a long moment, her eyes widening. Then she looked up with a smile that held wonder. Congratulations, Your Majesty, she said softly. You're pregnant. The world stopped. Pregnant. That was impossible. Rejected bonds couldn't produce children. The trauma to the mate connection made conception impossible. Everyone knew that. Except they weren't rejected. Not truly. Their bond had never been broken, only dormant. And now, completed and amplified. How far along? Theron asked, his voice rough with emotion. Only a few weeks. 3, maybe 4. The healer's smile widened. The babe is strong. I can feel its magic already, both Alpha and Omega bloodlines intertwined. This child will be extraordinary. The prophecy child, the older Omega breathed. He'd pushed through the crowd, his eyes wide. The legend spoke of it. A child born of true mates, carrying both bloodlines, who would unite the fractured pack world. We thought it was just a story. It's not a story, Elara whispered, her hand moving to her still flat stomach. It's real. Our child is real. She looked up at Theron, saw her own shock and joy reflected in his face. They'd just won a kingdom, started a revolution, and now they were going to have a child. It was overwhelming and terrifying and perfect. Mother? Caden had pushed through to them, his small face concerned. Is something wrong? Nothing's wrong, Elara assured him, pulling the boy close with one arm while keeping her other hand on her stomach. Everything's very, very right. How do you feel about being a big brother? Understanding dawned on Caden's face, followed by pure delight. Really? I'm going to have a brother or sister? In about 8 months, Theron confirmed, ruffling his son's hair. Think you can handle that? I'll be the best big brother ever. Caden declared. Then he looked at Elara with sudden shyness. Can I call you mother now? For real? Elara's heart cracked open. I would love that. The boy threw his arms around her neck, and she held him tight, breathing in the scent of pack and family and home. Behind them, the assembled wolves began to cheer again, the sound echoing through the palace. As dawn light began to filter through the windows, Elara stood with her mate at her side, her stepson in her arms, and her hand resting on the child growing inside her. Around them, freed Omegas celebrated their liberation. Loyal guards secured the traitors. And the Pack Council began the work of building a new future. Your Majesties. Lady Morgana approached with what might have been actual warmth in her eyes. If you're ready, we should begin preparations for the coronation. It's customary to hold the ceremony within a week of. We'll hold it tomorrow, Elara said firmly. At dawn, in the sacred pools. Let every Omega in the kingdom witness as one of their own is crowned queen. Let them see that change is possible. That equality isn't just a dream. Tomorrow? Morgana blinked. That's incredibly fast. We've waited generations for this moment. Elara's voice was steel wrapped in silk. One more day is all the patience I have left. The old woman studied her for a moment, then nodded with something like respect. Tomorrow it is, Your Majesty. At dawn. As Morgana left to make arrangements, Theron pulled Elara close, his arms wrapping around her and Caden both. Are you sure about this? He murmured against her hair. It's a lot to take on. Queen, mate, mother, revolutionary. You don't have to do it all at once. Yes, I do. Elara looked up at him, seeing the love and concern in his eyes. Because if we wait, if we hesitate, the old powers will regroup. They'll find ways to undermine the reforms. But if we move fast, if we establish the new order before they can organize opposition, we have a chance at real change. Then we move fast. He kissed her forehead. Together. Together, she agreed. As the sun rose over the kingdom, painting the sky in shades of gold and silver, Elara felt the future unfold before her. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, setbacks, moments when the old prejudices threatened to resurface. But she would face it all with her mate beside her, her children in her arms, and the support of every Omega who'd ever been told they were less than. The age of Omega oppression was over. The age of the Omega Queen had just begun. Epilogue. 1 year later, Elara stood in the throne room, her daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Little Luna, named for the moon that had guided them through darkness, had her father's ice-blue eyes and her mother's silver-touched hair. And when she smiled, which was often, tiny fangs showed that she'd inherited more than just her parents' looks. She'd inherited their power. The Western Territories are requesting Omega healers, Theron reported, reviewing documents at their shared desk. They ruled side by side now, 2 thrones placed equal. Apparently word of our reforms has spread, and they want to establish their own Omega councils. Grant the request, Elara said without hesitation. And send our best teachers with them. The faster Omega sovereignty spreads, the harder it will be to reverse. Already done. He looked up with a smile. You know, I was just thinking. A year ago, I was ready to sign away my throne to save Caden. Now I'm sharing it with you. We have a daughter who glows when she's happy, and half the pack world is adopting our reforms. Life is strange. Life is good, Elara corrected. She shifted Luna to her other arm and crossed to the window, looking out over the kingdom. In the distance, she could see the sacred pools, no longer forbidden to Omegas, but open to all who needed healing. Father. Mother. Caden burst into the throne room, waving a paper excitedly. Look. I got top marks in my Omega magic studies. Teacher said I might be strong enough to join the Healers Guild next year. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Elara beamed at him. The boy had embraced his dual nature, studying both Alpha combat and Omega magic with equal enthusiasm. He would make an extraordinary king one day, one who understood both sides of his heritage. Can we celebrate? Caden asked hopefully. Maybe with honey cakes? After dinner, Theron promised. And only if you finish your strategy lessons. Caden groaned but ran off obediently. Elara laughed, the sound free and full of joy. He's going to change the world, she said softly. He already has. Theron moved to stand beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. You all have. This kingdom is unrecognizable from what it was a year ago. And it's all because you refused to accept anything less than equality. We refused, Elara corrected. This was never just about me. It was about every Omega who needed someone to fight for them. Luna stirred in her arms, making a soft cooing sound. Through the window, the moon was rising, full and bright and beautiful. Elara felt the pull of lunar magic, the connection that made her what she was. Once, that connection had been something to hide. Something that marked her as less than. Now it was her crown. She was Omega Queen Elara of Silvermoon and Black Mane, ruler of the Northern Territories, mother of 2, maid to an Alpha King who'd loved her enough to let her go and brave enough to fight for her return. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. Come on, Theron said, tugging her gently toward their private chambers. Luna needs to sleep, and you need rest. Tomorrow we have meetings with the Southern Councils about extending Omega voting rights. Tomorrow, Elara agreed. But tonight, we're just a family. They walked through the palace halls together, passing Omega servants who no longer flinched when they saw her. Passing guards who bowed with genuine respect rather than grudging tolerance. Passing children, both Alpha and Omega, who played together without prejudice. This was the kingdom she'd fought for. The world she'd almost died to create. And as she tucked Luna into her cradle, kissed Caden goodnight, and fell into bed beside the maid who'd waited 3 years to hold her, Elara knew one truth with absolute certainty. The rejection that had broken her heart had ultimately led her here. To this throne. This family. This purpose. Sometimes the greatest gifts came wrapped in the deepest pain. And sometimes, Omega magic was exactly strong enough to change the world. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.